daughter called it a wellness visit. That was the phrase she used. Not a checkup, not a doctor's appointment. A wellness visit. I remember thinking that sounded like something you'd see on a spa brochure. I should have known then. Instead, I put on my good shoes, grabbed my jacket off the hook by the front door, and got into the back seat of my own truck. The F-150 I'd driven for 11 years, while my son-in-law drove and my daughter sat up front checking her phone. They took me to a place called Sunrise Meadows. I'd never heard of it. There was no doctor. There was no waiting room with magazines and a receptionist asking for your insurance card. There was a lobby that smelled like floor cleaner and something else underneath it. Something I couldn't name but didn't like. There was a woman behind a desk who already knew my name. And there was my daughter, pulling a folder out of her tote bag like she'd been rehearsing this moment for weeks. Because she had. They just forgot one thing. They forgot I still had my phone. My name is Gordon. I'm 63 years old, and I spent 31 years as a union electrician in Columbus, Ohio. I know how things are wired. I know that what looks dead on the surface can still carry a current. I know that the most dangerous mistakes aren't made out of malice. They're made out of arrogance, and my daughter and her husband were the most arrogant people I had ever known. It didn't start the day they drove me to Sunrise Meadows. It started the year after my wife passed. Diane and I had been married for 38 years. She was a math teacher, patient, precise, funny in a way that sneaked up on you. She died on a Wednesday in November, a gray Tuesday kind of day that had no business being as ordinary as it was. After she was gone, the house in Westerville, the split level we'd bought the year our daughter Renata was born, felt like a place that was waiting for something that wasn't coming back. I rattled around in it. I learned to cook pasta. I called my buddy Clyde on weekends, and we'd watch the Buckeyes and argue about nothing. I was sad, but I was managing. I was fine. Renata didn't see it that way. She and her husband Brent moved to a new subdivision in Dublin about 4 years before all this happened. Big house, 3-car garage, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks like it was trimmed with scissors. Brent worked in commercial real estate. He had opinions about everything and expertise in nothing, but he delivered both with the same confidence. When they came to visit, which wasn't often, I noticed Brent's eyes moving around the house the way they moved around a property he was assessing. He'd tap a wall, look at the ceiling. One time I caught him peering out the back window at the lot, and when I asked what he was looking at, he said, "Nothing, Gordon, just thinking." That was his tell. Brent was always thinking about money that wasn't his yet. About 8 months after Diane passed, Renata started calling more. I want to be careful here, because at first I was grateful. She'd check in, ask how I was eating, whether I was sleeping. Normal daughter things. But the calls had a shape to them. They always curved, eventually, toward the same landing point. The house is too big for one person. You've got all those stairs. What happens if you fall and nobody's there? What are your plans, Dad, long term? I told her my plans were to live in my own home and mind my own business. She laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. Then, one Sunday, she and Brent came over for dinner and brought a brochure, just the one, slid out of Brent's jacket pocket after dessert like a card trick. Sunrise Meadows. Independent living and memory care, it said on the cover. I looked at the pictures. Smiling white-haired people doing water aerobics, a dining room with cloth napkins, a man in a cardigan playing chess. I pushed it back across the table without opening it. I don't have a memory problem, I said. Nobody said you did, Renata said. It's more about community. Connection. You're alone here, Dad. I'm alone because your mother died, I said. That's a grief problem, not a housing problem. Brent cleared his throat. He was good at that. Clearing his throat before he said something he'd already decided to say regardless of the conversation. The market in Westerville is incredible right now. This neighborhood especially. You know what a property like this would go for in this climate? There it was. I told them both to have a safe drive home. That was October. By March, the approach had shifted. Less obvious. Renata stopped mentioning Sunrise Meadows by name. She started talking about her own stress instead, how worried she was about me, how she wasn't sleeping well, how Brent had been so supportive but she could tell the worry was affecting their marriage. She was framing my continued existence in my own home as damage to her well-being. I recognized the technique because I'd seen Brent use it in arguments before. Make the other person responsible for your emotional state. It's a kind of leverage that's hard to push back on without feeling like a bad father. I wasn't a bad father, but I started to wonder if maybe I'd been too trusting of someone who had spent the last 20 years making my daughter into a different version of herself. The call about the wellness visit came on a Thursday. Renata's voice was warmer than it had been in months. Lighter. She said she'd found this great integrative health center, the kind that did full physicals with nutritional panels and cardiac screenings, the thorough kind that regular insurance doesn't always cover. She said she'd already made the appointment and paid for it as a gift. She'd come pick me up herself. We could get brunch after. I asked her why she'd made the appointment without asking me first. She said she knew I'd say no if she asked. She laughed when she said it, like that was an endearing quality. Like my resistance to being managed was a quirk. I went. I put on my good shoes. I got in the back of my own truck. I watched the exits on I-270 and noticed we weren't heading toward any of the medical campuses I knew. We crossed into an older part of the county, big oak trees lining both sides of the road, buildings set back from the street. Brent was driving. He had music on low. Renata was on her phone. Nobody was talking. "Where is this place?" I asked. "Just a few more minutes," Renata said. She didn't look up. We turned into a long, curved driveway. Through the windshield, I saw a brick building. 2 stories, well-maintained, bower beds, a parking lot with visitor spaces, and a sign near the entrance, navy blue letters on white stone. Sunrise Meadows. My stomach dropped. "Pull over," I said. Brent kept driving. "Brent, pull this vehicle over right now." He pulled up to the entrance and put it in park. He still didn't look at me. I looked at my daughter. She had turned around in her seat. Her expression was the one I'd seen on her face at difficult moments her whole life. Resolved, a little guilty, committed to a decision she'd already made. She looked like she was delivering news rather than committing a betrayal. "Dad, just come inside and talk to them. That's all. Just talk." "This is not a wellness visit," I said. "You need more support than you'll let yourself admit," she said. Her voice was careful, practiced. "We love you. We want you safe." There are moments in your life when you understand something so clearly that there's no room for doubt or softness. This was one of those moments. My daughter and her husband had planned this. The folder in her bag, the appointment already made, the decision already settled before I ever got in the truck. This wasn't concern. This was logistics. I got out of the truck. Not because I was cooperating. Because I needed to stand on solid ground. The automatic doors opened. The smell hit me the same way I'd been warned. Antiseptic, overwarm. A faint sweetness underneath it all. That was working hard to cover something heavier. A woman at the front desk smiled at me with the kind of smile that's been given to 1,000 people in the same seat. And then I saw the folder come out of Renata's bag. I saw her hand it across the counter. I saw my own name on the tab. "We're checking in, Mr. Gordon Webb," she said. "We spoke with Dr. Hartley's office last week." The world went narrow and still. I turned to my daughter. "You are not doing this." Brent appeared at my elbow. Not threatening, just present. Managing me like a situation. Renata kept her voice low. "Dad, please don't make a scene. This is the right decision. We've handled everything." She reached out and touched my arm. "Your car's going to be in good hands. And the house, we're going to take care of all of it. You don't have to worry about any of it anymore." She said it like it was a kindness. A nurse appeared. Young woman, natural hair pulled back, a name tag that said, "Precious." She had a bag, a black duffel, the one I kept on the shelf in my closet, the one I'd had for years. They had been in my house. They had gone through my things. They had packed for me like I was a child being sent somewhere. Renata reached out and took my truck keys from my jacket pocket. She didn't ask. She just reached in and took them. I heard myself say her name. Just her name. Nothing else. She couldn't hold my eyes. She looked at the folder on the counter instead. They walked me back to a room on the first floor. It had a window that looked out at a parking lot, a bed, a dresser, a chair, a television bolted to the wall. Precious set the duffel on the bed and told me lunch was at noon, that there was a common room at the end of the hall, that someone would come by later to go over the daily schedule. She was kind about it. Not her fault. Renata stood in the doorway. She said she'd call tomorrow. She said this was going to be good for me. She said she loved me. Then she left. I sat in the chair by the window. I watched my truck pull out of the parking lot with Brent behind the wheel and Renata in the passenger seat. I watched them stop at the exit and turn right without looking back. I watched the truck disappear behind the tree line. Then I sat in the silence of a room that had no memory of me in it and tried to understand what had just happened. Here is what I understood. My daughter had a medical power of attorney that I had signed after a minor surgery 2 years prior. I had signed it because the doctor said it was standard, something you do when you go under anesthesia, a precaution. I had not read the full scope of it. I had trusted my daughter with something she was now using as a weapon. Here is what else I understood. I was still completely in my right mind. I had all my faculties, and a medical power of attorney, whatever its scope, does not give anyone authority over a person's property, finances, or real estate. Not in Ohio, not anywhere in the United States. You cannot sign away a competent person's home because you convinced a notary they might need it one day. They had made a mistake, a significant one. They had taken my keys and my truck. They had left me my phone. I didn't move for a long time. I let the grief sit there because there was no use pretending it wasn't grief. Not just for the immediate situation, but for the daughter I thought I'd raised, for the version of her that used to bring me drawings from school, that used to sit in the tailgate of my old truck and tell me about her day. That daughter was still in there somewhere. But Brent had planted something in the soil of that marriage, and whatever had grown hadn't left much room for her. Then I thought about Diane. Diane, who had been suspicious of Brent from the beginning in that quiet way she had of noticing things without making them a referendum. She'd said once, when we were lying in bed late at night, that she worried Renata had confused his confidence for competence. She'd said it gently, the way she said hard things. And then she'd reached over and put her hand on mine and said, "But she's our kid, Gordy. We hold on." I straightened up in that chair. I opened my contacts and scrolled to the name I needed. Herschel Boone had been my neighbor for 14 years before he retired and moved to Hilliard. He was also a real estate attorney with 30 years of practice in Franklin County. We'd fished together. I'd been at his daughter's wedding. He knew Diane. He'd been at the funeral wedding. He'd been at the funeral. I pressed call. He answered on the third ring. "Gordon, long time." "How are—" "Herschel," I said, keeping my voice low. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to not ask me too many questions on this call. I'm at Sunrise Meadows in Westerville. I was brought here without my consent. My daughter has a medical POA that she's misusing. She has my truck keys and access to my house. I need help." There was a pause. Not a long one. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't sign anything," he said. "I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning. As your legal counsel, they have to give me access. And Gordon, don't let them see you upset. Whatever you're feeling, keep it out of your face." "Already ahead of you," I said. "That's my guy," he said, and hung up. I put the phone in my pocket and looked at the window. The parking lot was filling up for afternoon visiting hours. An old man was being helped out of a minivan by a woman who might have been his granddaughter. He moved slowly, carefully, but his face, as he looked around the parking lot, had the expression of a man who was exactly where he'd chosen to be. I intended to have that face again. The next morning, I was awake before the facility's breakfast cart came around. I ate what they gave me and thanked the aide by name. I sat in the common room and watched the morning news and made small talk with a retired school teacher named Florence, who told me about her cat and her begonia collection. I was the most agreeable resident Sunrise Meadows had seen in some time. That was intentional. I gave nothing away. At 9:45, I heard raised voices near the front desk. Renata's voice first, sharp, composed, certain. "He's resting, and he's not receiving visitors this morning." I'm his legal next of kin, and I've authorized. Then Herschel, 67 years old, 6'1", the kind of calm that comes from 3 decades of courtrooms and not 1 second of needing to perform it. Ma'am, I am this man's attorney of record. Restricting access to legal counsel is a violation of his civil rights under Ohio Revised Code. I can cite the specific section, or you can step back. Either works for me. I was already in the hallway. Herschel looked at me over Renata's shoulder. He gave me the smallest nod. His briefcase was in his hand. He had driven 45 minutes at 9 in the morning for me, without a second thought. Renata turned when she heard me approach. Her expression shifted through 3 or 4 things in the space of a second. Surprise, recalibration, something close to fear. Dad, this isn't. Good morning, Renata, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. I'm going to speak with my attorney now. Herschel and I went to my room. He closed the door. We sat in the 2 chairs by the window, and I told him everything. The brochure that came out over dessert, the phone calls about her stress and her sleep, the wellness visit that wasn't, Precious bringing the bag down the hall, my keys being lifted from my jacket. Herschel listened with the particular stillness of someone who had already started solving the problem while you were still describing it. The medical POA, he said when I finished. Do you remember what you signed? Did you read it? I signed something the hospital gave me before a hernia repair. 2 years ago. He nodded slowly. In Ohio, a durable power of attorney for healthcare, which is what you likely signed, authorizes someone to make medical decisions for you if you're incapacitated. It does not, and I want to be precise, it does not give them any authority over your real property, your bank accounts, your investments, or any other financial assets. Not 1 cent, not 1 square foot of that house. That's what I thought. They've made a significant overreach, he said, and they're going to keep making it because they don't know what they don't know. He opened his briefcase. Here's what we're going to do. He laid it out the way a man lays out a plan when he's done this before and knows exactly which order the pieces have to go in. First, I would sign a new comprehensive durable power of attorney. The financial and property kind, the kind that covers everything, naming Herschel as my agent. The moment I signed it, it would supersede anything previous. Renata's medical POA would still exist, but it would be limited to its actual scope. More importantly, it would make clear to any title company, any bank, any court, that Herschel and only Herschel was authorized to act on my behalf. Second, he was going to contact a real estate agent he trusted, a woman named Carla who'd worked Franklin County transactions for 20 years, and they were going to list the house quietly, not on the open market with a sign in the yard. A targeted listing to pre-qualified buyers. Cash if possible. Quick close. Third, the proceeds would not touch my existing checking account, which Renata almost certainly knew the routing number for. The money would go directly into a new account at a credit union on the east side, set up in my name only, with Herschel as the secondary authorized agent. Not a joint account. Not a trust Renata could petition to access. Mine. What about the house itself? I asked. The question sat heavier than the legal ones. Diane and I had bought that house the year Renata started kindergarten. We'd put in the kitchen ourselves, tile by tile over a summer weekend, arguing about the grout color, laughing about it years later. Renata had learned to drive in that driveway. Gordy, Herschel said, and he said it the way a friend says a name, not an attorney. The house is already gone. They're living in it, in their heads. The question now is whether they profit from it or you do. I looked at my hands. These hands had pulled wire through conduit in buildings all over central Ohio for 3 decades. They knew how things were built and how things came apart. Sell it, I said, but I want to have a say in who buys it. He understood what I meant. I needed a witness for the signing. I walked into the hallway and found Precious at the nurse's station. She had brought my bag to the room that first afternoon, but she had also been the one, since then, who always gave me an extra minute when she asked how I was, who seemed to actually wait for the answer. I asked her if she'd be willing to witness a legal document. I told her it was important. She looked at the papers in Herschel's hands, looked at me, looked at Herschel. Then she looked back at me. "Yes, sir," she said. "Whatever you need." She signed her name in a clear, even hand. She wished me luck quietly, in a way that made me think she'd seen situations like this before and hadn't always seen them turn out well. I signed my name, Gordon Allen Webb. The pen was steady. Herschel gathered the documents and snapped his briefcase closed. "Play your part," he said at the documents, and snapped his briefcase closed. Tired, settled, resigned. Let them think you've accepted this. Then he was gone. That evening, Renata called. I answered on the second ring. "Just checking on you, Daddy." She hadn't called me that in years. "How was your first full day?" "Fine," I said. I let a little air into my voice, a small deflation. "The food's all right. I'm getting used to it." "That's great," she said. Her relief was audible, immediate, real. She wanted this to be over. She wanted me to be settled so she could stop feeling the part of herself that knew what she'd done. "Brent and I are going to come by this weekend." "Okay," I said. "We're starting to get the house organized," she said. "There's a lot to sort through." "You know how Mom kept things." I said nothing for a moment. I thought about Diane's handwriting on the labels of the bins in the basement, her sweaters folded in the cedar chest, the watercolor she'd painted of the lake at Alum Creek that hung in the hallway. "You be careful with their things," I said. Quiet. Not a threat, just a fact. "Of course, Daddy." We hung up. I put the phone on the nightstand and looked at the water stain on the ceiling tile above the bed. Someone had been in that room before me who had looked at that same stain, probably from the same angle. I wondered about them. Then I stopped wondering and started planning. The next 2 weeks passed in a particular kind of slow motion. I was a model resident. I went to the afternoon group activity, a trivia session I won handily, to no one's surprise, including mine. I had pleasant conversations with Florence about begonias. I called Clyde one evening and told him a partial version of the truth. Enough that he said, "Gordy, those people have lost their minds," which was more comfort than he knew. Herschel called every few days. His updates were brief and purposeful. Carla had found a buyer quickly. A couple in their early 40s, the husband a high school principal, the wife a pediatric occupational therapist. 2 kids under 10. They'd been outbid on 3 other houses in the neighborhood. They wanted to put raised vegetable beds in the backyard. They loved the lot. They made a cash offer, 5% under asking, clean, no contingencies, close in 3 weeks. I asked Herschel to tell them about the tile in the kitchen, that Diane and I had done it ourselves, that there was a small chip near the stove that I'd meant to fix for years and never did. I don't know why I needed them to know that. I just did. "I'll tell Carla," Herschel said. Meanwhile, Renata called with updates from the house. She'd gotten a dumpster for the garage. She'd been editing, her word, the things in the basement. She said a lot of it was dated. That she and Brent were going to repaint the living room, that the kitchen tile was really showing its age. "We might redo the whole floor," she said. "It'll look so much better." "Whatever you think," I said, my voice thin and tired. She was so happy to hear that. The night before the closing, Herschel called and said the papers were ready, that the title transfer would be filed by 4 o'clock the following afternoon. He said Renata and Brent had been to the house that week to drop off some of their own furniture. They were making themselves at home. "Let them," I said. "It'll make it better." He understood. What happened next, Herschel described to me in detail on the phone that evening, because I wasn't there. And not being there was its own kind of satisfaction. Renata had invited some friends over. A celebration, she called it. Though what exactly they were celebrating was a story she had to have been telling herself in a particular way to feel comfortable with the telling. There were maybe 8 or 10 people. Wine, appetizers, music. Brent was in his element. Big house, people to impress, a story about making smart decisions. The doorbell rang at 8:15. Brent answered it. On the porch were 3 people. Herschel, in his good dark suit, calm as a Sunday morning. Beside him, the principal and the occupational therapist, hands linked, looking nervous and determined. And behind them, Franklin County Sheriff's deputy, not aggressive, just present in the way that law enforcement presence always restructures a situation. Brent's face, Herschel said, went from host smile to confusion to something closer to fear in about 4 seconds. "What is this?" he said. It wasn't really a question. Herschel introduced the couple beside him. He explained in the way that Herschel explains things, precisely, without drama, without mercy, that the property had been sold by its legal owner, Gordon Allen Webb, through his designated power of attorney, that the deed had been filed with the Franklin County Recorder's office that afternoon, and that the couple standing beside him were the new owners of record. "They're asking you to vacate their property," Herschel said. Renata appeared behind Brent. She'd heard enough to come to the door. Her face was dressed for a party, and whatever was underneath it when she heard those words, "I will not pretend I don't wonder about." "That's impossible," she said. "My father can't." She stopped. "He's in a facility. He can't just—" "He was of sound mind at the time of signing," Herschel said. "He remains of sound mind. The document is valid and binding." He held up the deed for her to see. "This is their home, ma'am." The deputy stepped forward. "Patient. Professional. You'll need to gather any personal belongings and vacate the premises this evening." What followed, Herschel said, was not dignified. Renata's composure went first, in pieces, then all at once. She cried. She argued. She said things she may or may not regret. Her friends gathered their things and found reasons to leave, the way people always find reasons to leave when someone else's crisis requires them to be present for it. Brent tried to negotiate, to find some leverage point in a situation that had none, and watching Herschel simply not engage with any of it the way water doesn't engage with stone. That, Herschel said, is what finally broke through. They left. The couple from the North End, who wanted raised vegetable beds, stepped across the threshold of their new home. I was discharged from Sunrise Meadows that same evening. I walked out the front entrance at 8:50 with my duffel bag over one shoulder and Herschel waiting by his car in the lot. Precious was at the desk when I passed. I stopped and shook her hand and thanked her. I'd left something at the nurse's station for her, an envelope with a card and enough inside to cover 3 months of her car payment. She had been kind to me when she didn't have to be. That matters. It always matters. I had arranged, through Herschel, to stay at an extended stay hotel near Easton while I looked for an apartment. It wasn't glamorous. The bedspread was the color of a waiting room. But I had chosen it myself, and I slept better that night than I had in weeks. In the morning, Renata called from an unfamiliar number. Her voice was different. Not the practiced softness of the last several months. Just tired and scared, and somewhere underneath all of it, still my daughter. "Dad, where are you? We need to talk." "All communication goes through Herschel," I said. "That's the arrangement now." "Dad, please." "I love you, Renata," I said. "I do. But I'm not having this conversation today." I hung up. Brent called from his own number an hour later. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was not gracious. I didn't save it. Herschel handled the rest. When they finally reached him, he told them the following. The proceeds from the sale of the house had been divided according to my instructions. A portion had gone into my new account. The truck, the F-150 they'd had returned to my name within a week of the POA signing, courtesy of Herschel and a tow yard lien notice, was mine again. But the largest portion, a number that made Herschel pause on the phone when he told me, had gone to establish a fund in Diane's name at Columbus State Community College. The Diane Webb Skilled Trade Scholarship, full tuition for 2 years, renewable, awarded annually to a student enrolled in an electrical or HVAC or plumbing program who demonstrated both financial need and academic commitment. Diane had believed in working with your hands. She had believed in people who build things. She had spent 30 years watching her husband come home smelling like solder and sawdust, and had never once made him feel like his work was less than anyone else's. The fund would carry her name for as long as the college stood. When Brent heard the number, Herschel said, there was a silence that went on long enough to be meaningful. Then, he gave it away? He just gave it away? Herschel said, he invested it. There's a difference. I found an apartment in Grandview Heights, 2nd floor, tall windows, A small second bedroom I set up as a workshop. The first piece I made in that room was a small walnut side table. Simple joinery, nothing fancy. The kind of thing I'd make just to keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. I put it by the window. On the table is a letter on heavy cream paper. It came 3 weeks ago. His name is Devin. He's 22, first in his family to pursue a trade. He writes that he'd been working 2 jobs to save up for the program and had almost decided to wait another year. He writes that the scholarship changed his calculation entirely. He writes that he hopes to work commercial electrical someday, the kind of big building work, and that he wants to do it right. I have read that letter 6 times. He doesn't know me. He knows Diane's name on the document. He'll probably never know the full story. That's fine. That's better than fine. The best things we build aren't the ones with our names on them. I still have my phone. I still have my truck. I still have my hands, which are not too old and not too frail, and which know the difference between a solid joint and a weak one. My daughter made a decision that she will have to live with in ways I'm not responsible for. I hope she finds her way back to herself someday. I hope Brent lets her. Those are the 2 things I hope about that, and I've decided that's enough to hold. Diane used to say that the thing about skilled trades, what she admired about them, what she tried to teach her students about any craft, is that you can't fake the finished product. You can talk around a bad weld. You can paint over a crack. But in the end, the house either stands or it doesn't. The work is the truth. She was right about most things. I'm 63 years old. I have a view of Grandview from my workshop window. I have a letter from a 22-year-old who is going to wire buildings in this city for the next 40 years. And every morning, I wake up in a place I chose. I'm not lonely here. I'm free. If this story found you at a moment when you needed it, then it did what it was supposed to do. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from. Your voice matters more than you know. People ask me sometimes if I regret how it all played out. They mean it as a soft question, a gentle one. But there's a harder question hiding inside it. Do I regret what my daughter became, or what I had to do because of it? And the honest answer is that I try to keep those 2 things separate, because one belongs to grief and the other belongs to clarity, and mixing them up doesn't serve either. What I've come to understand, sitting at this workbench in Grandview with sawdust on my hands and Devin's letter on the table next to me, is that what happened to me wasn't random. It was the result of choices made over years by people who decided that the appearance of caring was a reasonable substitute for the actual thing. Renata and Brent didn't wake up one morning and decide to be the kind of people who trick a 63-year-old man into the back of his own truck. They built themselves into those people incrementally, one small justification at a time, until it felt not only acceptable but logical. That's how that kind of thing works. It doesn't arrive all at once. It accretes, and on my side, I let it happen longer than I should have because I wanted to believe the version of my daughter that existed before Brent reshaped her. That's not weakness, I don't think. That's just what love does when it hasn't been given a reason to stop yet. But there's a point where holding on to a version of someone that no longer exists stops being loyalty and starts being a way of avoiding a painful truth. I crossed that line the moment I watched my truck leave that parking lot, and crossing it, as much as it hurt, was the thing that cleared my head. What Herschel did for me wasn't just legal maneuvering, it was a demonstration of what real intelligence looks like under pressure. Not panic, not retaliation, not the kind of reactive decision-making that feels satisfying for about 48 hours before it costs you something. Real intelligence in a hard situation is slow. It measures twice. It understands the difference between what you're entitled to feel and what you should actually do. Herschel had 30 years of practice at that distinction. I had 31 years of wiring buildings in the cold and the heat, and learning that a shortcut in the work always shows up eventually, usually at the worst possible time. Between the 2 of us, we had enough to work with. The part that stays with me most isn't the eviction. Though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in knowing Brent had to walk out that front door in front of his own guests. The part that stays with me is Devin's letter, a 22-year-old kid in Columbus who almost didn't apply because he was working 2 jobs and couldn't see the path. He can see it now. Diane's name is on the document that changed his calculation. She spent her whole career believing that the most important thing you could give a person wasn't a grade or a lesson plan. It was the condition to be able to try. That's what the scholarship does. That's what the house became. The house I lost was wood and drywall and 38 years of memory. What replaced it is a decision that will repeat itself every year in the life of someone I'll never meet, built on the foundation of a woman who deserved to be remembered that way. I didn't lose my home. I converted it into something with a longer half-life. They wanted an old man with a bad back and a quiet life and no fight left in him. They forgot that the men who wire buildings don't just know how to work the current. They know how to shut it off too.